everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. And you know what makes me happy is when someone comes on my show one time and then they come on the show 2 times and then they send you an email and say, can I come back again? And you're like, can it get any better? No, because Adinah's here. Now what? This is 4th time now? Come on. Like, this is the best thing ever to have my guest here as a guest co-host. Why? Because she comes with research. She comes with experience, and she is just a super great person. So you got all that in one person, right? Dave, that seems like impossible, but I can prove to you because she's right here with me. Adinah, welcome back as my guest co-host to the How to Podcast series.
Hey, thanks for having me again and again. When I need my day fix, I'm like, let me just jump on his calendar, and then I surprise you because I'm on your calendar. I'm pretty sure this is 4 or 5. I counted them.
Come on.
When I looked at the on the system, you sent them to me. I was like, is this 4 or 5? I can't remember because I looked at it late night. But I'm going to be the most guest.
I'm clapping because I'm very happy. Yes, please. That title is yours. I would love to have you meet that goal. That's great. Awesome. Again, for people who are hearing your voice for the first time, where have you been? As one of my first questions to you as a listener, where have you been if you've not heard Adinah's voice yet? Because she's a podcaster and she's been here many, many times. Adinah, where are you in this big world of ours?
I am the author of the book, Butterfly Blue, The Pain of Infertility and the Power of Forgiveness. I have a podcast with my good friend of over 45 years, and our podcast is Black Butterfly, Black Pearls. And I always tell you, I like to walk in the house and say, Alexa, play Black Butterfly, Black Pearls podcast. So that's like one of my favorite things to do. I'm also on YouTube with my husband. We are marriage coaches. It's Nick, N-I-K, and Adinah, and that's on YouTube, Adinah.
So we have a lot of content going out into the world from your side. We've had you many times. I don't want to duplicate all those great conversations because every time you come with more things to talk about. But you've done some things lately that are pretty exciting, and I'd love to chat about that. You had the chance to go on NPR, like the NPR, like everyone hears that word and goes, "Oh, NPR," like the angels sing. You were part of this. Like, okay, first of all, how did it happen, and what was the show?
Well, I'm the type of person, I'm always looking for opportunities to like get out there. And we have a local station here, and it's PBS, WJCT. It's like public broadcast station. And so I'm in that building a lot, and I realized that they had a new producer for First Coast Connect, which is a local show. And I said, hey, who's the producer of the show? I'd love to be on the show. And the individual gave me the producer's email address. And so I emailed her and was like, hey, I would love to be on the show. And she was like, well, I'm a producer for a couple of shows, and I have an NPR show. What's health got to do with it? And since my book talks about my infertility journey, they were like, we want you to be on our Mother's Day episode. And so I'm like, heck yeah, let's do it. So I popped in and met the doctor who is over the show and went to the studio and did the interview. It was really fun.
Okay, so I listen to a lot of NPR shows, and they are so well put together, super researched, which is you, by the way, super researched. So I see the fit there. But to be behind the scenes, can you give us a little behind the scenes look into NPR world as a guest on a podcast? Because we only see and hear what we hear at the end result, but I would love to learn from you. What did you learn as a guest in that environment?
It's such an inspiration to be in a real life studio where you could hear a pin drop. It's like, and even when I listened to it, I was in my car, it felt like, I don't know. I used to love to listen to the Bee Gees, and you can hear all the different sounds. So I could hear everything in it. It was so, and then the professionalism there, you have an engineer, you have the producer there, and they're all listening and giving you tips and saying, get closer to the mic and all that fun stuff you see on radio. And it's like, oh man, this is real major. And then even the engineer was like, we'll stop it at 24 minutes. And I'm like, how do you know, like, right, exactly when you will stop it? Oh, it was like, it was an inspiration.
So did you walk in there as a guest not knowing what they were going to ask you, or did they give you some kind of outline?
No, they just told me they were going to talk about my book, and he asked questions. And he asked really good questions, really like informative questions because it's about health. And so they were looking at like the health of, women and maternal rates and all infertility treatments and different things like that. So it was really good.
Awesome. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes because everybody can go hear that episode and cheer you on going, oh my gosh, I know someone who was on NPR. Like, it's a big time for us to celebrate that. So congratulations. That's amazing. Did you get any feedback from your community about that appearance?
Most people, it's so crazy, Dave, because people are so accustomed to me doing all the things. Just recently, I was honored by AARP and threw out the opening pitch for a professional baseball game. And they did my whole bio on there. So people are so accustomed to me doing all the things in my community. They're like, oh, that's just Adinah doing her thing. Who knows?
Well, I'm thrilled for you because I've been kind of watching your journey as a podcaster and a creator and celebrating you as an author. It's amazing to see success find its way to you because you just show up, you just do your thing, and people come and fall in love with you, and good things just happen to good people. So I'm celebrating with you, and congratulations. It's great.
Thank you. I'm having so much fun. It's just, I just think my family is so accustomed to it. They're like, whatever, it's just her doing her thing.
So that's not it. You also have done something on like an online radio platform too. And one thing you talked about was that you just learned that practice was really important for something like that. Tell us the lesson there, and what was that show?
Yeah, that was the show. It was a podcast with Steve Harvey Morning Show. It's a syndicated radio. Steve Harvey, who's on Family Feud.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
Well, his co-host has a radio show, and he's junior. You'll hear about him on the Steve Harvey Morning Show. And so he had me on his podcast talking about sickle cell. And so that's a health podcast also. But I'm on with him, and he's practicing how to do my intro. And I'm just like, all this practice is amazing. We get on here and I'm just reading the information. And if I slip up, I just keep it going. But all the practice, I'm like, wow, that's so professional for him to have a team and to still feel like he needs to do so much practice. And I'm like, wow, that's professional.
Okay, so that's a good point. So for you and I, as a small team creating content, doing all the things, what did you learn from a big team environment that maybe we can bring to a small team environment? Any lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I think because it feels like a lot of times like they just get out there and talk, but they are really behind the scenes like we do, doing the research, producing, preparing, getting ready for it. And so that just really like inspired me to say, okay, you're on the right track, but you could do some more and practice more and be more prepared and not just have the research, but know it like second nature.
Yeah, I think going back to the whole practice thing, I think we don't do enough of it as podcasters. I think we buy a microphone or jump on our phone and hit record and then put it out in the world like it's perfect from the very first second we talk. I know, and my wife can attest to this, I am not perfect in many, many things. She's got a list of all the things that I am not really good at.
As a good wife should.
It's a long list, I got to tell you. It's a long list. So to assume that, hey, I can just be a podcaster because I've heard one once, and now I'm going to be a podcaster, and I'll be an NPR superstar with one episode because, hey, looks easy. There's a lot of practice that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of growth. And then you hear people say, I have X number of episodes, but my first episode, oh my gosh, I've grown so much over the time of doing this. But I just think that a lot of people have this assumption that you can be perfect from day one. And I kind of want to say, maybe practice a little bit more if you think that your first episode is going to be the best, because I know you're going to grow and you're going to get better at it. So give yourself some grace as a podcaster or content creator writing your book. Your first chapter wasn't perfect. There's a lot of editing. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, right?
Right.
You're going to redo it multiple times. So your thoughts around practice. How much more practice should we be putting into our podcast?
Oh, we should put in so much practice because even listening to my podcast from the beginning to now, my podcast partner always says, I can hear us getting better. And I think that's amazing because I do think people think you can just hop on and just talk, but you have to prepare. You have to know, you have to produce the episode. You have to know what content you're going to talk about. Even you and I, we get together, but we still produce the episode a little bit before we get on. It's not just winging it and flying by the seat of your pants. And then editing. Editing is like my least favorite thing, but it's most people's least favorite thing. But you just have to do it so you can put the best product out there. You don't want to just, kind of like make the ceramic ashtray as a third grader and just put it out there like, here, look at it, love it. It's all cracked and broken. You really want to, polish it a bit.
I was listening to an audiobook recorded by the author, and I don't know what happened in this recording. The first couple chapters of the audiobook, excellent. The quality of the content, amazing. Like, I was learning it so much by listening to this audiobook. And then when you got to about the fourth and fifth chapter, something happened where the author reading the text of her own book kept stumbling, restarting, getting frustrated. Like, oh, I can't believe I didn't do this right. And then a big sip of water. Gulp, gulp, gulp.
You heard all
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And she did it. She would do like the same line over and over and over. And I'm like trying to figure out, was this like on purpose to show you how to record an audio? But I don't know. I got lost. And so I would fast forward through a little bit. Great content. Like, I love what she was talking about. But she kept on leaving in all of the mistakes and not doing any editing at all around the fourth, fifth, sixth chapter. And as a listener, I couldn't listen to it anymore. I had to stop because I was so confused because she kept saying the same thing over and over again. I thought my phone was broken. I'm like, why is this happening? So as much as we hate editing, it does help the listener to be engaged, to give them great quality, to honor their time as a listener, where they're not looking at their phone with disbelief, like, what? Why is this like this? Why are you doing this? Yeah. Sneezing and coughing and sniffling of your nose, and there's a phone rings and a doorbell and a dog barking. You're like, some of that stuff could be taken out, right? Just so that we have a better experience, right? So
yeah, I agree. I just listened to Whoopi Goldberg's book because I am an author. I love to listen to audiobooks so I can hear the author talk about their story, and you can just hear the nuances and when they remember certain thing, or like when I listened to Michelle Obama's book, she got choked up talking about her dad, and that's just all the things I want to hear when I'm listening to an audiobook, where you're almost like crying with that person or you're learning stuff. Like with Whoopi Goldberg, she was talking about her mom went away for 2 years because she literally had a nervous breakdown. And her ex-husband, because it was in the 60s, decided that they would do electro treatment on her. And I'm like, this guy, he is the reason she is, having a nervous breakdown because he left her to be a single mom. And now he gets to decide what happens to her. He's not even married to her anymore. But, we talked about that on my podcast, but it's just amazing to hear those things. And she literally did not know who her children were when she came back, and refused to go to the doctor from that day forward, whereas she could get medical treatment because she was so scarred by the medical treatment that was given to her during that time of very important need. Then she just refused to go to the doctor when it really could have helped her. And so that reminds me of how the people who have come before us, we have to honor them. We have to honor the women who have fought and stood in the gap for us. And hopefully other people will be able to stand on our shoulders in the future. When we're talking about podcaster, we're new at this and it's been going on for years, but hopefully other people will find their voice as well.
What else is coming up for you on the podcast? Do you have any big plans for the show? Like, give us some insight on what's coming down the road.
I'm going to tell you what is coming down the road as far as podcasting. My husband, and I know we mentioned this before, I am producing his podcast as well. He has a podcast on financial independence. So very soon he will be doing his podcast. I'm doing some interviews for him and getting other people to know who he is. I retired last year. He's retiring in the very near future. He retired my mom. And so he's really big in the financial independence space. So what's coming down the pike is me producing his podcast as well.
Okay, so I have a guest suggestion for you, for your husband.
Okay.
He goes by the name Cash Kid. Now, Cash Kid was on my podcast. He's like grade 6. And he has a podcast around financial freedom for children.
What?
He is amazing. So he gave an example where they had free time in class. I think it was grade 5 or grade 6. And the teacher says, everyone, you can have 10, 15 minutes to free time, do whatever you want. So he's sitting at his desk looking around at all the kids doing whatever. And he puts up his hand to the teacher and says, is it okay if I check my stocks? Grade 5? Check my stocks? So the teacher calls home to the parents and goes, just so you know, this happened in class today. And they're like, yeah, that's him. So he created a podcast all around financial help for kids to learn how to be better with money. And he's a kid. He's so amazing.
That's amazing. My 8th grader is doing the same thing where he and his friends are talking about stocks and let me look at my stocks. Because we have one stock that just did a 10-to-1 split. And my husband is the one that have to tell you about that because that's so not my wheelhouse. But yeah, I think that's amazing. I need to get his information so I can get him on the podcast. But yeah, these kids now, oh my goodness, they are looking at their money and they are checking it out. I don't think any of them are going to have to work if they're doing all of this.
No. So I was so inspired by him. And as a young podcaster, that's what made me really excited. That here we are having someone who's much younger than the two of us, which is awesome. And that's what he does. He's a podcaster and he loves it and he's doing it really well. And I'm just really thrilled for him that he can do that. Yeah. That tells me when somebody reaches out to me, Adinah, and says, oh, no one's going to listen to me. I don't have the experience or the knowledge in the space to be a podcaster. I'm like pointing them to Cash Kid. Going, okay, he doesn't have that excuse, neither do you. He's doing it, and he's not 18. He can't give financial advice, but he's like, that doesn't mean anything to him. He's still going to do a show.
Yeah.
And he's learning as he goes, and he's getting smarter, and he's getting more knowledge, meeting great people. He'll soon hopefully meet Nick as well. And then he's growing and becoming stronger and more confident as a kid. And I'm like, imagine our world if everyone was on a journey of getting better at whatever it is you do. That would be awesome for our kids to pick up on that, right?
Yeah, that's one of the monikers of financial independence is teach everything you know. And hopefully, and it sounds like he is teaching everything he knows at such a young age. And that's really going to catapult him in a different stratosphere coming up because he's a young kid. He's sitting there while other kids are picking their nose or whatever they're doing.
Right.
He's checking out his stocks and it's like, you rock, kid. And that's amazing.
It is amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, so everyone listening, go back to hear my episode with Cash Kid. Also go on your app, look up Cash Kid, and you'll find his show. It's amazing. So I love that. So shout out to Cash Kid. That's great. The other thing, I just recently, for my author podcast, I just went over 400 episodes in the last 3 years. So how's that? That's a lot, right? And one of my recent guests was Adam Nimoy. I don't know if that last name sounds familiar to you, but his dad is Leonard Nimoy, also known as Spock from Star Trek.
Yeah. Who is?
Wow.
Is he? Adam Nimoy is his son, or is that
his son?
Oh,
it's his son. Yeah. So he just wrote a book about his dad, who's very, very famous, and all the Trekkies in the world just sat up. Wait, what? But I got a chance to talk to Adam about growing up with a famous parent, what it was like, when everybody wants a piece of his dad, and he, as his son, wants a piece of his dad, has to share him with the world. I'm like, so we got in some really interesting conversations. But what I love about podcasting is the fact that you get a chance to have time with people that you probably will never have time with otherwise. Like they would never take your call, respond to your email. They're like, who are you, Dave? I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
But add a podcast to it gives you the opportunity to have these great interactions with people. And for a new podcaster listening, it might not happen right away, but if you work at it, you show up, do your thing, be consistent, people take notice. I believe his team saw that I had X number of episodes and that I would be a good fit for his book and for a conversation with him. So it didn't come with 10 episodes. It came with 300 plus episodes as a point of reference, but it was a chance to meet with somebody that I watched him on Big Bang Theory. He was a guest on there and his dad was on that show. I love that show. And now I got to talk to him about that. It was so cool to have time with somebody that you admire.
Yeah.
And that they would take time to talk to you. It's so cool.
Yeah.
That podcasts allow us to do that.
Absolutely. I was at a book signing, a book festival last weekend, and I was talking to this young lady, and she wrote a book. And I was like, you need to get on some podcasts. You need to get your name out there. But she was selling quite a bit of books that day. And so I'm just like, there's other ways to get your name out there and to really have a conversation and get some buzz about this book. Because if you don't have a team, like the young man you were just talking about, if you don't have a team, you just got to put yourself out there, and getting on podcasts is an amazing way. Kind of like how we met, need a guest. Hey, do you want to come and get on a podcast? And so I think that's an amazing opportunity and something we can tap into. You don't have to be on Oprah Winfrey, like we used to have to do back in the day, or Sally Jesse Raphael, and make yourself look crazy. You can just get out there and get into some podcasting networks. And so I think that's an amazing opportunity now, because we do have a connection and a voice and an opportunity to meet other people and to get out there.
And don't be afraid to go back and come on shows a second, third, fourth, 10th, 100th time. Like, you can build that bridge.
Yeah.
And what's nice for the audience is they get to hear your voice again and go, I love when Adinah's on the podcast. Like, it's just so cool that she comes back. Right? Because now there's a bridge there. And my hope in all of this, by having guest co-hosts, is that people come and find your show. They press play on your podcast. They buy your book. They do something in your community now because they get to know you and they get to go, Adinah, every time she shows up, she brings value. She's always here to serve. And I feel a connection with her and she's my person. Right? So that's what I want from all my guests as they come on as a co-host. Let's get you some more listens. And we'll have links, obviously, to your show, but let's have people come and fall in love with you. And it takes a little bit of time to do this. I appreciate that. But I think the return on our investment of time by doing these kind of podcast guesting and hosting and all that stuff really does help build community. And I love having guests on my show.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about it is that it gets to build the two worlds. You're in Canada, I'm in America. And so it gives us an opportunity to where we don't have to fly somewhere. We can pop in, meet, and build bridges and build community with, Canada. And I can, maybe get some listeners from Canada. You can get some listeners from America, and we can just make this thing grow bigger and bigger. And that's what I think is amazing.
So if you're a podcaster and you're thinking, I'm just going to do solo episodes, I'm never going to have a guest. There's an advantage to having a guest because now you have two communities coming together in an interview and a chat, and the opportunity to kind of cross over into each other's communities and be known by each side, which is great. So you can multiply your communities just by having a guest. So I know you might love having a solo episode, but consider having the occasional guest possibly just to kind of build your community and your network. Again, Adinah, you and I wouldn't probably have met otherwise had it not been for guesting and podcasting. And my life would have been different not having you in it. So I love the fact that we have this interaction. And I would also say for people who only do interviews, the other side of it would be that your audience would love to hear from you as well, whether it's a bonus episode, 5-10 minutes, where they just hear you. Because every time I listen to a host having a guest, I feel like I'm sharing the host with the guest as a listener. So I don't really get time one-on-one with them. You feel like a third wheel sometimes. It's like, I just would love to hear the host. Like, what's your story? Why are you podcasting? Who are you? Because every time I just hear you ask questions, I never hear you answer the questions.
Yeah.
So I love when a host takes a break from an interview-based podcast and does something special where it's just them talking to me as a listener. I feel like now I have a better bond with them.
Yeah.
So think about that. If you're only an interview-based podcast, throw in the occasional solo hosted episode and put your guests on hold and talk to your audience, because it really does build a bridge with them and they feel more connected with you when you're talking to them directly.
Absolutely. I think that's an amazing idea, because my co-host and we have our episodes, but we have had times where we've called someone in because our podcast is not interview style, but we have had times where we would allow an interview because we want the community to get to know this person. And so that's an amazing opportunity for the community to know who that person is and to get to know what they're doing in the community, because I think that's so important to build community.
Yeah. And it takes for a host that only interviews, it takes away the safety net where you always have somebody there to help you to do the content. When you do it by yourself, it's all on you. And it's really weird because you're recording into a microphone, looking at your monitor. There's no one else here, but you have to kind of be energetic and be out there. You don't want to be like, hi, everybody, welcome to the podcast. You want to be up. You want to be like, hey, everybody, I'm glad to be here with you. Thank you for listening to the show. And now it just feels like it makes you be a little bigger as a person. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that hides in the corner, Adinah. When we have a big event, I've been there 3 minutes. I'm looking for the exit. Like, how do I get out of here? Because I'm done. There's too many people for me. I've peopled out. I gotta go. So when I come to do a solo episode, I know that I have to go just a little bit more Dave than my normal Dave. Because my normal Dave is kind of relaxed and calm and not so out there. So I know I have to turn the dial up just a little bit, a little extra Dave when I do a solo epised.
Yeah,
So it makes you different.
Yeah, I've done solo episodes, and that makes me appreciate my podcast partner. That solo episodes, and I'm like, kid, are you kidding me? Because she is really good at bringing certain things out of me and asking the right questions, because we have known each other for over 45 years. So she's able to ask the right questions, which one of our episodes, she helped, and I think I mentioned this before, but she helped me process the time where I was triggered, where I had forgiven someone for something, but I had a trigger. And that's the thing that happens, because when you go through the forgiveness process, it is a process. And sometimes you will get triggered. But because she knows me so well, she was able to ask the right questions and help me to process my feelings around it. And other people got to see that real time or hear it real time. So when I did my solo episode, it helps me appreciate, I need her on the podcast, because sometimes I'm like, she's not producing. She's there to, help me to, work through some things. And so, and just her bouncing ideas back and forth. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to do some solo episodes so you can really appreciate your guests and other people.
Do you think there's a downside to podcasting with someone who's known you that long? Is there anything that are like, it's a little more difficult when somebody knows you so well?
Yeah, I think the downside for us, and her son basically said, y'all have your own language. And people, sometimes y'all have like an inside joke and we're like, nobody else knows what's going on. Or we're like laughing insanely to something. And it's like, what is funny? Well, because we know each other so well, we can like anticipate each other's thoughts and we know what's happening. So it's like kind of like the behind the scenes. So it's amazing and fun. But I think some of the downside is people don't know what you're talking about because you have an inside language.
So, okay, that's a good point, because I have listened to shows where they do something like, oh, Adinah, remember the watermelon thing? Oh, that was so funny. Remember that time? That was so cool. The watermelon, that was so awesome. Yeah, good times, good times. And as a listener, I'm going, what? What watermelon? What are you talking about? I want to know the story behind the watermelon. And then you move on.
Yeah.
You're on to the next topic. And I'm like sitting here feeling like I just missed something, that I missed out on a great story. So it's fine to do the watermelon story if that's your thing, but then give some context, explain it, right? Or cut it out. Like just take it out of the conversation if it doesn't serve the audience in the editing part. Don't feel bad that that moment in time didn't serve the audience. I think that's the one thing maybe I would caution podcasters is if it doesn't make sense to the audience, does it need to stay in the podcast? Because again, at the end of the day, it's all about the audience that's listening to the show. That's why we're doing this. Otherwise, it's a recorded Zoom call with our best friend.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's fine. But I like leaving personality and who we are in the podcast, but as well, making sure that the audience understands. You know, it might be like, oh, Adinah brought up the watermelon. Here's a quick synopsis of the watermelon story. I tripped and fell and my head went into a watermelon and I was wearing it like a hat. Okay, so that's what we were talking about. Yeah. And they're like, oh, okay, I picture it. Now I understand the story better. I feel engaged and I got a little insight into Adinah and Dave, right? Again, that story is completely made up.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I feel like now I'm on the inside, not on the outside looking in. And as a podcaster, you always want to bring the listener in so that they feel like they're part of the story and part of the cool group, you know, at lunch, sitting together at that table. We want them to feel included in that, not sitting off on another table going, they're laughing over there and I don't know why, right? Bring them over and explain it, right? That's always good.
That's an amazing tip. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That is an amazing tip to bring individuals in. And that's some of the things we can giggle, but if you mention something, you got to tell the story. You just got to tell it. It's not cool.
Yeah. And then you could also turn that story, say the watermelon story, into a shirt where there's a guy with a watermelon on his head. And everybody that understands the joke and the story would love to wear the shirt. And they're like, what is that about? Oh, this podcast with Adinah, it is so good. There's a story about a watermelon, blah, 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 blah. They feel like they're part of the group now because they know this thing. So you can turn those funny, interesting moments that are signature things for your show into like your favorite saying or your favorite catchphrase or whatever, right? And you could turn those into merch and then sell them to your audience. They can support the show and wear something they identify with.
Yeah.
And go, I am part of Adinah's community and this is how I show up in the world. Ask me about the podcast. I would love to tell you about Adinah's podcast.
Yeah, that's amazing marketing there too.
See?
That's advertising, marketing. That's getting more listeners. That is like, yeah, that's it.
It's all community building, right? You want community with your podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So I mentioned I got 400 episodes coming up for Living the Next Chapter. This whole thing around having like anniversaries, like I've been podcasting for 5 years, or I've reached 100 downloads, or I have 100 episodes. Those are anniversary moments. I call them monumental moments where you would build a little monument to remind yourself of this moment in time that you met that thing, whatever that is. I got my first 5 listens. Congratulations. That's a monument. That's a moment, right? Celebrate that. You have an article around anniversaries and things like that. So I would love to kind of we'll have a link to this article as well in the show notes, but take some of the content of that article and let's reframe it for podcast world, for people celebrating the number of episodes, the length of time they've been podcasting, a specific podcast, anything that we can do to celebrate those milestones as a podcaster. Let's take your article and kind of reformat it for podcasters. What do you want to talk about from the article?
Yeah, this is Cosmo.com. And it is questions to ask every anniversary. So here's a good one. And you're talking about podcast anniversary. My podcast anniversary is coming up also in August because we started our podcast in August. But here's one question. It's only 10 questions here. And here's one thing. Do you still have the same vision for the future? So that's a good question to ask yourself for the podcast. Do you still have the same vision that you had in the beginning for the future of the podcast? So that
I know, yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
I like that question.
So that could work
for you,
anniversary or the podcast. So that's why I wanted to switch it into the podcast.
Interesting. Okay.
Here's the next one. How do you want to see our relationship evolve in the next year? So for podcasting, you could say, how do you want to see your podcast evolve for the next year? What are your goals for the podcast? Because with relationships, you have to have goals, but you also have to set goals for your podcast also.
Good. Perfect. I love that one.
Yeah.
Let's give me another one. I love when you bring these things. This is good.
Yeah. One more, and I love research too. One more is what's one big exciting thing we can budget for or plan for looking forward to the next year? So,
Oh,
what do you want to budget for? What's one big thing you want your podcast to do? Is it more subscribers and listeners? What do you want to do? Do you want to start monetizing? What do you want to do for your podcast for the next year?
I was helping somebody with their new podcast, and when I met with them, Adinah, they said, I asked the topic about monetization if it was in their plans, and they said, I really don't need to monetize. I'm self-funded. I don't want to have any commercials. So I said, okay, I get that. But what if you had something like Buy Me a Coffee, in that people can then donate to the show? Because you as a podcaster are going to create value for your audience, and they're going to want to reciprocate and give back to you and give value back to you for what you're giving to them. So what if you don't need the money, that's fine. But if you set up a Buy Me a Coffee and collect donations from your audience, make it available to them. You don't have to be preachy and share it everywhere and do all that stuff. Just make it available, right? And just leave it alone. But as I donate to your podcast, because I want to say thank you as a listener, that you take the funds that come in from your donations and then you repurpose that donation somewhere else. So maybe there's a single mom, a couple kids, it's Christmas time, and she doesn't have food or presents for their family. You take your money from your podcast, say it's $1,000. You go out and give it to them or give them food and presents for their kids, and then come back to me as a listener and say, hey, everybody, you've been donating to the podcast. Thank you for supporting our show. I want to let you know, just an update. It's the end of the year. We've raised $1,000 because of you. And I've taken that money and given it to this family. And now they have a good Christmas because of you. I just want to say thanks.
Yeah.
As a listener, Adinah, to your show, where I gave $5 last time, I'm giving you $25.
Right.
Knowing that you're going to do something great with it, because I feel like I'm part of something bigger than just me. You don't need the money, but don't make it impossible for your audience to be engaged through donations. What you do with it is up to you as the host. But let me do something kind to you for all the kindness that you give to me, giving me this great free content.
Yeah.
So open the door and see what happens. Okay? So I always encourage people, even if you don't think you want to collect money for your show, at least have some way for us to say thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
And what you do with it is up to you. But I'm just telling you that if I know that you're going to take donations and give it to someone else, that speaks highly of you as a person. When all we hear is sell, 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 buy my thing, buy my thing, buy my thing. When somebody's here going, hey, I just donated to a local charity in my community because of you. I gave it to the food bank. I gave it to this. I help people with this.
Right.
I feel connected to you now in a different way than just a listener. I'm your community member and I want to support you because I know you support other people. It's that whole circle that happens.
Exactly.
So, right. So that's my encouragement for anybody that's thinking about monetization. And you're like, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to bug my listener. Just remember, they might want to be bugged. They might want to help you. And if you don't give them the opportunity, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm encouraging people to ask. Just put it out there.
Yeah.
And let whatever happens. If you get $10 donation, then pay for the person in line behind you at the drive-thru and give it to them. It could be as simple as that. So just give people the opportunity to say thank you.
Exactly. Good point. Did you want one more tip or are we going to move?
One more, and then we'll close it off. Let's go.
Okay. Here's one more. Do you think we accomplished the goal we set for ourselves last year?
Oh.
So that gives you a chance to revisit your goal. What was your intention? What was your goal for your podcast last year? And did we meet it? And do we need to add to the goals or is that still the same goal?
That is, I love when you make me think, Adinah. I love it. That's exactly it. And I love the fact that we can take this article that's written in context of something else and apply it to podcasting, because that'll all make us think better about our show, plan better. Because if you're thinking, a year ago, I had no thoughts of what my goals would be, maybe I need to set a goal. Maybe I've never done that.
Yeah.
So that would help me be more focused and directed, show up, be consistent, understand my why, because I have a goal. Maybe we have no goal. So that's a good point that you raised. I love that.
Set your intentions ahead of time. The podcast that I was speaking of is Nick's podcast, and that's Nick Johnson, and that's Everyday Money Heroes. That's the one that I'm producing now for next year.
Beautiful. Looking forward to that. And I'll have to have Nick come on the podcast as a guest too, right? Is that possible?
Yes, that would be amazing. I'm going to set that up.
Okay.
So next
all
time
right.
I pop on, it won't be me, it'll be Nick. Boo.
No, we're just going to have to do two. One with you and one with Nick. Please don't do that to me. I need you back.
You know, I have a goal of being the most co-host, the most time co-hosting.
All right. I'm up for that. I love it. Okay, before we go, Adinah, where are we going to find you? All of that stuff. Where can we get your book? Come on, promote. Let's do that.
My book is on Amazon, and that's Butterfly Blue, The Pain of Infertility and the Power of Forgiveness, and it's on Amazon. And you can also get it at your public library locally here, but you can also go on Bibliography and get it where you can just read it online, and that's under the library as well. And then my podcast, Black Butterfly, Black Pearls, is with my friend of over 45 years, and that's everywhere you get podcasts. We got Everyday Money Heroes, and that's a podcast that I'm producing with my husband, Nick, and that's for financial independence. And then you also have our YouTube channel, and that's Nick and Adinah, and we're marriage coaches. We've been marriage coaches since 2003. So over 21 years, we've been marriage coaches. And so that's Nick, N-I-K, and Adinah, A-D-I-N-A-H.
Every time you come on my screen, you come with research, great ideas, a great attitude. Your smile is amazing, by the way. And you just show up. And I'm thrilled every time I see your email in my inbox, because I know it's going to be a great conversation. So again, you have not disappointed. You have never disappointed. You always show up well. And I really appreciate the fact that you come back again and again and again and again. Just keep coming. I'm just going to leave the door open for you, okay?
Thank you.
I love it. Everybody, all the information, as always, in the show notes. Go support an amazing podcaster, author, creator. She's got it all. Adinah, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope they're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our Meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.